Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust TV. We'll move straight ahead to our discussion segment. Now, if you've been following the headlines or simply living in Nigeria, you will agree that public protests and demonstrations have become a familiar sight. Now, from anti-subsidy removal protests to end SARS, from labor union strikes to regional agitations like the recent Free Nnamdi Kanu protest in Abuja and the Southeast, the streets are increasingly becoming the people's platform. Now, what was once seen as an extraordinary act is now more of a regular occurrence. Whether it's students, workers, traders, or activists, protests have become a go-to response to perceived injustice, government inaction, or unpopular policies. But what does this say about our democratic culture, our institutions, and the gap between the people and those in power? Now, to help us unpack this growing trend and what it means for Nigerians' political and social future, we're joined by Dr. Austin Aigbe, a political and public affairs commentator from the African Center for Leadership, Strategy and Development. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dr. Aigbe.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Now, let's begin. How would you define Nigerians' protest culture as it stands today, and what's different now compared to a decade ago?
That's a very huge and more like a jam question. Protests a decade ago would be like 2015. If you look at the popular protests at that time, maybe around 2014, even 2015 elections, where there was an election, ahead of an election, where certain group of individuals who now today represent the APC did a protest to call the then President Jonathan to attention and to have credible election. And so that protest was usually supported, and there were a lot of people who supported that protest at that time, including Reverend Bakare, who developed a systemic agenda of save Nigeria protest, something like that. Save Nigeria. Save Nigeria was the title. There was a huge movement that we need to save Nigeria's democracy. And today, after the election of February of 2015, there were a lot of calls. And of course, maybe people argue to say maybe President Jonathan's eventual step down, in quote, or acceptance of the defeat could have been because of those calls, public calls, those protests. Yes, protests have been very significant, but all through between now and a decade ago, there have been other protests, like you just read, the NSAS, whether you like it or not, the NSAS protest resulted in certain changes, even though it was highly politicized. The governmental institutions are gradually understanding that when you politicize protests, you can quickly gain advantage of it. And what usually happens in a political and information landscape is that when protest is on, before you know what's happening, there's another information. I mean, they just create another thing to take people's focus away from that intervention and take them somewhere. That is a strategy that has always happened. The NSAS protest did actually ended SARS brutality, even though you may see a resemblance now coming up, but did end it. President Buhari, now late, had made a public comment accepting the 5-point agenda. Of course, end bad governance with Tinubu's administration was also politicized. You know, in end SARS, it was the mindset was that, hey, this is a protest against Buhari, and it is a southern agenda. So when Tinubu came to power and there was the end bad governance protest, it was, hey, this is a northern agenda. It's against Tinubu because it's a southern. You see, this politicization of protests will not take Nigeria anywhere.
All right, Dr. Aigbe, at this point, with the reoccurrence of protests in Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians would say that this is the only way that they can effectively, put their point across and be heard. But is Nigeria's protest culture a reflection of democratic vibrancy or a collapse of institutional dialogue at this point?
So, two things, and I do agree on both sides. First is that protest is a phenomenon in a democracy. When people don't agree with the with government or government decisions, you engage in public demonstration, civil demonstration, because there are protests that eventually turn blizzard and turn violent. They are not the one we're talking about. We're talking about the word protest, demonstration, public demonstration, which is an objection. Huh?
Peaceful protest.
You may call it, it's actually protest. But sometimes when it's non-violent, yes, I mean, you can call it peaceful protest, but I would love to use the word civil disobedience. Right. Civil disobedience may not necessarily be violent, but you can engage and because I heard some callers earlier talk about they block road, they do that. These are civil disobedience, and you can't say it is violent. Although there are individuals when we saw in NSAS protests and even end bad governance, you will see another team, sponsored team, come into this so-called civil disobedient protesters and then infiltrate them, and before you know what's happening, it goes really very violent. So back to your question. Protest is a phenomenon. In fact, it's allowed in a democracy. And I tell you that one thing that most Nigerians don't know. If you go to the National Assembly today, there's a very big open space. I think that's where they're using for their car park now, where you have the arm somewhere. You drive down to the place where the House of Reps on this side, the Senate on this side. That big space was created for protest. It was created by the military, that when people have letters to submit, you take those letters to those places and drop it. So there are people who go there and pick them up. But due to, in quote, democratic architecture who don't like protest, they gradually start pulling people out of that location, and they created a security gap that, citizens no longer have access to their own people. The National Assembly is a house of the people, so people are supposed to go to that house, whether it's the House of Reps or the Senate, and drop a protest letter, organize a protest, someone comes in and receive the people. But we no longer have that. So right now, the protest is now happening on the outside. And you see people go to the National Assembly, they block the gate, you don't have access to that facility, then they go on the street. So because they needed government to respond, the strategy is to engage in some form of civil disobedience. Again, underline the word disobedient. I'm not saying civil obedience. Civil disobedience, to try to block the road so that other people can get the effect, and then a part of government. Is it good? Maybe yes, maybe not. But it's a way of saying that institutions are not responding to us. But when you say that XYZ is happening and the government is not responding to the yearnings of the people, a protest can take place. In fact, on Friday last week, there was a protest. But it didn't make the kind of noise that it's doing. So on Friday, there was a motion that was commissioned by some civil society organization where they said that there's no more food to put on the pot. And that was on. Because they didn't engage in civil disobedience, so nobody knew about it. So they controlled themselves off the road, they moved to the side, and they do that. People say, oh, this is a good protest. But nobody's talking about it. You are talking about this because it's civil disobedience. They disobey the rule because they say that the rule has not obeyed them, in quote, or the authorities who is supposed to implement the rules are not obeying the rules. So you engage in civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is allowed. You see, what's happening now, people are watching the television right now, it's clearly, because the number determined, George Floyd protests in the United States garnered about 500,000 people. If you put 500,000 people on the street in Abuja, there will be great luck. So you don't necessarily need to block the road. The road will block by itself because the people walking.
All right. Now, speaking about the impact when it comes to these protests, you just made mention of, some people being infused in those kind of protests and instigating violence and unrest. I want to hear your take on it and how you came about understanding that these kind of things do happen.
So what is it? I don't get your question, Aigbe.
You made mention of instigations when it comes to these protests, instigating violence.
Yes.
All right. How did you come about understanding that these things happen?
Okay, I didn't need to come about it when you take your cameras to those protesters. If there was violence in that protest yesterday, just take your camera and try to sample opinion. You are going to sample opinion to the point where you get people's views to say, why are you here? I don't know, they call me. Number one, that individual was mobilized to that protest without knowing why he or she was there. Some will tell you, we are here to support this government. Meanwhile, the protest is supposed to be anti-government. Some will tell you, in fact, there were recent protests, in fact, end-back governance protests. One was being interviewed and they asked him, why are you protesting? He said, protest, we are hungry. And they were supposed to be pro-government protesters. We are hungry. Well, we are here to protest, but you are here for government. He said, yes, came here to support government, but we are hungry. That's a clear. So you don't need to try to find out. And most of the time, these individuals, if you trace them, you'll see them attacking another set who may be opposed to their original view. So when you see that happen, so with end-back governance, for instance, we saw vehicles dropping off protesters, and those vehicles were blinded vehicles, marked the plate number were blinded, so you don't have access to it. But then, this kind of vehicle, you can trace them. The kind of ownership of those kind of vehicles, you can trace them. You see buses dropping them and they blind the name on the buses or the title of the buses, so you don't identify those buses. Why will you blind a bus if you're truly going to protest? And from that NSAS, we saw this set of individuals being dropped off using stones to drive away the others who were protesting. So that's a clear infiltration that is sponsored. Most of the time, those infiltrators don't even know why they are there. They've gotten certain fringe benefits to go there to say, well, your mission is to go and scatter them. So it doesn't matter how they scatter them. So, but when you put a camera on their face, the real reason why they are there will be exposed.
And who do you think, so excuse me, Maimuna, because at this point, who do you think those infiltrators or the backrollers of those infiltrators are?
It's simple. If the protest is anti-Trust TV, and there's a protesters who are against those protesting against Trust TV, it will be that the first finger will be pointed at Trust TV.
But my point is, are you saying that the government are instigators of those infiltrations?
Certainly, if there's an anti-governmental protest, and you get a pro-government protest, it's simple. Check Natasha's protest. There was a protest so-called pro-Natasha, which is seen as anti-Senator Babio and the Senate. Soon after, we saw, boom, those who were Senate President and the Senate, and of course the Senate, and eventually there was a clash. So it is clear to see that the Senate President may not be aware, I use the word very loosely, may not be aware, but is one of the strategy to dismantle protest. And the government understood that. It's a language that is well understood. Otherwise, there won't be the protest that is going on. So why don't you go and do your protest? So if there is a protest happening at a villa, for instance, and you want to do a pro-government, go to another venue and do a pro-government protest. So why take it to the same location? And then there's a conflict. And then there's a fight. And then there's a police intervention. And then there are arrests. And usually those arrested are those who started it. And which are those who are usually the anti-institutions that they tend to want to change.
But then you would also agree with me that, there are some protests that has happened in Nigeria that are really peaceful. Forget the fact that, we have other people that would definitely come in to want to obstruct the main agenda in which, that protest is being carried out. And in our constitution, we have a freedom to protest, because it is a tool for us to use to, air our grievances and channel our frustration to the government. But then one of the major issues that we have seen over the years, each time, there is a peaceful protest, because, of course, bad governance is one of them. It was a peaceful protest, not until when, whoever sent whoever to come and, disrupt.
Whoever sent
yes, to disrupt that protest.
Yes.
But then one of the major issues we have seen over the years is the fact that, the authorities are always, intimidating these protesters when they come out to protest for a good cause. Why do you think that, they are always at the forefront to always attack those protesters at the end of the day?
That's where I think where most of those government action is actually wrong, because there are perspectives. You see, I sit on this side. There's a picture I get now. There are those who sit on the other side who get a different type of picture. For instance, I'm sure you would have known the story about the 6 figure. So if you write a 6 in front of me, I will be seeing it as a 6. The fellow on the other side will see it as a 9. So where government, if there's conflict because there are protesters who are seeing 9, the government needed to come to a table to say, what are you seeing? You are seeing 9. I'm seeing 6. Can you turn the table around so that you see that what you're actually seeing is 9 and not 6? Or can we move? So you move and then you create it. But now attacking, no, it is 6. It is not 9. The other fellow will say, no, it is 9, because it's truly the person sees 9. Why attack protesters? Why don't you come out open? For instance, what's going on, let me use the word you talked about, there are certain protests, peaceful protests, like the one of yesterday, arguably was peaceful until they were tear gas and all of that. And again, the tear gas was to maintain public order. And public order is a national security concern. So you have to try so that people don't infiltrate it. Because, you know, government will quickly run to say, the reason why police had to move in was because you are avoiding miscreant from taking it over and then using it to invade shops and pick some, so that kind of civil disobedience that will then lead to conflict or lead to violence. So the police quickly move in, which is good. But the law requires, because at some time this even happened elsewhere, maybe outside the country, but let me stay in Nigeria, where you are required by law to officially write to the Commissioner of Police to say you are protesting. But we know if you write to the Commissioner of Police you are protesting and this is your protest type, it's never going to approve. They will tell you all manner, we are in an insecure environment. Let's not eat up the polity the more. What's happening in Nigeria? We all need to support the government. Yes, we all need to support the government, but allow the protest to go on. Manage it. Tell us where you are going. This is your protest. Please don't move about. Stay in a location. If you want to move about, why don't you have pocket of protest? Maybe there's one in National Assembly. There is one in, recently, the End Bad Governance, they were like, okay, go to National Assembly. Sorry, not National Assembly. Go to the stadium. You and I know. Spend 200 days protesting National Stadium. Nobody, it has no effect. None. Until you have to move out to that airport roadside, that roundabout stuff, Unity Fountain, not Unity Fountain, the Welcome to Abuja stuff, I forgot.
City Gate. The
City Gate, yes. If just block the City Gate alone for just 2 hours, is enough to spend 200, is more than enough, spending 200 days inside national. So where will you go? Where will you confer protester to a location of no effect? But if you are confine them to the gate of the National Assembly, it may not have an immediate effect, but after a while, we had to block the gate of National Assembly for about 7 days or more than 7 days, about 10 days, when the National Assembly declined to assent to the gender bills. It was a show that women had to move out, but again there's an exit gate behind National Assembly, so they could still come in. We knew that gate exists, but we didn't want to go block it. We wanted to make a mark by staying in front of the recognized gate, which is the gate opposite the Federal Secretariat. So when you confirm them to a location, it doesn't really mean anything. But arguably, when government understands that this protest will send a very wrong message to the international community. Yesterday, on Joy News in Ghana, they had beamed what's happening in Abuja, the protest. That's already gone international. And CNN definitely may pick it. BBC, I didn't watch it because I saw that. And I'm like, it's too early to pick now, but they picked it already. Presidents, when they go out, they don't want to be asked about those questions. Hi, Mr. President. I saw the protest. What's happening? You say, protest? And you can't deny it. So in as much as they don't want reputational issues, they're also very conscious. I'm talking about governmental institutions now. They are also very conscious to create a good name for the nation. That's why you see NOA and Co. trying to brand Nigeria well, talk about Nigeria well, which is good. Talk about Nigeria well. But today, everything here on the social media doesn't really represent it. Meanwhile, you can control daily trust. Can you control Twitter? Can you control Facebook? Can you control people actually expressing their feelings? The injustices around the country. Can you control? You can't control it. You can't. So it's better to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people so that it becomes a general phenomenon. For instance, road. Road is a public good. The poor, the rich, they have not, they have, the talakawas, all of them, we all use the same road. The road does not determine that you have a billionaire. So create those level of public goods. Make things accessible to the poor. Lift more Nigerians out of poverty. Create, today I'm told that we no longer have middle class. It's either you are rich or you are poor. Even though I don't agree to that sentiment, because many of us belong to the middle class. I cannot say because I have a car or two, because of that I am rich. No. I can also say because I don't have a car, because of that I'm poor. So there is still that middle class. But what the people who does the analysis is that even the middle class are feeling the heat. Unlike many years ago where middle class are a bit comfortable, you could still do other things. Now, you now watch what you eat. You are at home, there's maybe a bag of rice you bought like 6 months ago, and suddenly you went there, and then because you are thinking about the next price.
All right. So now, with, for example, the NSAS protest, it has been etched in Nigerians' memories, in Nigerians' minds, because of what happened during those protests. So at this point, after the NSAS protests, other protests came after that.
Yeah.
So do you think that things have changed when it comes to protests in Nigeria, structurally, politically, and culturally? Or do you think that it's just a continuous repetition of unaddressed grievances to Nigerians in different ways?
There are too many grievances in this country. For instance, when you look at the releasing Nnamdi Kanu now, I wouldn't have expected, from my policy point of view, from someone who understands good governance, etc., I wouldn't expect President Tinubu to have inherited the challenge with Nnamdi Kanu. Personally, I would not have done that. Or I would have taken opportunity with the presidential pardon to send that in and send a message that you are not for A or B or C. As late President Buhari said, I'm not for anybody, I'm for everybody. But soon after you discover that it's really not, that statement was a fallacy. You see, this is the best time President Tinubu should actually do the needful by granting the request of the protesters. Again, why keeping someone who you have refused to sentence him? Because that worries me. Since 2021, you have refused to sentence him. The cases have been up like an upheaval thing. It goes up, it comes down, it's sent to another judge, it's sent to this judge, it's sent to that judge. For Christ's sake, deal with the issue. Prosecute him, send him to jail if you want to. Let him go and cool off wherever. You can't continue to keep him awaiting trial sentence while he's not even in jail. I think it's still, it's not been, So for me, this is the best political opportunity. But again, if he does it, look at the other people come. No, don't do it. If you do it now, it will look as if it's because of the protesters that you are doing it. Either way you want to do it, create a sense of justice. Speak to the judiciary as a president. The judiciary is a third arm of government. Speak to the judiciary, clear this case out. Give them a mandate between now and 6 months, clear this case out. So we know. If we can clear the presidential tribunal cases within a specified time, we can clear all of the election petition within a specific time. This is the time where you clear this case within the next 60 days. Then people work towards that 60 days. Let the judge, let the lawyers present their cases. And in any case, he has been granted bail again and again, all of that. But that's an aside. And when you look at protests, Why do people protest? Grievances, objection. And it is not wrong for people to have grievances. It is not wrong at all. In every institution, in every family, there are grievances. Once you have more than one person in a room, there is bound to be grievance. Because there is what we call in politics, people define politics generally as he who gets what, how, and when. That it is the authoritative allocation of scarce resource, which means to allocate scarce resource, again, underline the word scarce. So if the resource is scarce, there are people who may not get it, or there are people who will get less. Once they get less, that's grievance. So you then enter some grievance negotiation and then you discuss it out. But when you pile up those grievances, it creates room that the government is not listening to us. And when people begin to perceive that government is not listening, it creates this kind of violent protest and unnecessary protest.
All right. Thank you. So, well, we're out of time. Thank you, Dr. Austin Aigbe, a political and public affairs commentator from the African Center for Leadership, Strategy and Development. Thank you for helping us.
Thank you. Just to quickly say that I don't work for African Center for Leadership. I consult for them, but since my guy owns it, I'm sure because they sent my name here. Yes, so I actually work as a consultant.
Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be reviewing the front pages of our national dailies. Do stay with us.